Hi there. I've decided to record this chapter at least today. I may record a second, but I'm not sure. I'm a little tired because I didn't sleep until like 4 a.m. Yeah, not the brightest moment, but wasn't my choice. Anyway, uh, let's get to this. This is chapter 17 of Black Cats Are Bad Luck and So Are You, Kid by Holly. 3 days passed. Zuko continued to go to school and sit on his desk whilst listening to his teachers. Each day, the itch to write down what he was learning grew, especially as Nezu kept tutoring him. Bakugo avoided him, and Izuku kept trying to get him to talk to him, or even look at him, but each time he tried, something got in the way. It hurt. But either way, he still got to be the center of attention around his friends. They were all still head over heels for him. A few were a bit shy because he was a black cat, but Izuku shrugged it off and kept his distance. To make them feel better, before he knew it, 3 days had passed and it was finally the weekend. He was laying on the couch watching his homeroom and English teacher talk quietly on the couch, without actually listening to their conversation, when the doorbell rang. He sat up and his English teacher stood and walked over to the door. When the door opened, Izuku heard the familiar greeting of Eri. He perked up more and watched as Eri ran up to the couch, greeting Azawa distractedly as she grabbed Izuku and lifted him up, hugging him tightly and swinging him around. Izuku gasped for breath as his homeroom teacher laughed softly and responded to her quick hello with a hello to you too. Mirio and Mr. Yamada walked into the living room, watching as Zuko was swung around by an excited Eri. They were obviously trying not to laugh at Izuku's plight, but the boy didn't mind. Eri was happy, and that's all he cared about. Miro set a bag of things on the counter and looked over at the other blonde, who was focused on the twirling Eri and Izuku. Are you sure you're okay with taking her for the weekend? You have Izuku, and it may be more than usual. The blonde put a hand on the other's shoulder and patted comfortably, smiling at him. We will be fine, kiddo. You need some time to be a kid also. You and your friends, go on. We will be fine. The younger blondes sighed and nodded, saying a final goodbye to a distracted Eri and now dizzy Izuku, before leaving them be. His English teacher shut the door behind the boy, and he left, and Azawa pat the young girl's back gently, making her stop spinning and look up at the man. Izuku was grateful that he began to feel like he was going to throw up. The man laughed softly at the small cat's dilemma and looked down at the girl. All right then. Have you eaten? Eri shook her head, and his homeroom teacher nodded. The man stood and made his way to the kitchen, but was stopped by his English teacher. Nope, I'll make lunch. You sit and take care of Eri. The raven-haired man sighed and nodded, going back to sit down on the couch. Eri climbed up onto the couch with Izuku in her arms and sat down beside the man. She looked up at him and smiled. Can we watch Up? The man smiled and nodded, grabbing the remote. Zuko wiggled around, trying to get comfortable on the girl's lap, but he heard a small snickering to the side of him. He looked over to see Sushi to the side, being the source of the noise. Just as Zuko was about to respond to the other, Eri moved him around and put him on the other man's lap. Then she got off the couch and moved over to Sushi, who stiffened and ran off, jumping up to the safety of his cat tower, watching Eri down below. Eri huffed and walked over to a box of cat toys, grabbing a feather on a string connected to a long stick, began to wave it in front of the other cat to try and lure him down. Though Sushi turned his nose to the other way and ignored it, turning so his large fluffy butt draped off the edge of the place he sat. Eric gasped and looked back at the man behind Izuku, who was laughing softly at the little interaction. He doesn't like to play much. He's a lazy thing. Eri huffed and walked back towards Izuku with the toy and gave it to wave it in front of him. To amuse the girl, he swiped at it, though the more he did so, the more the urge to write went away, and more his instincts were appeased. So he got more involved in the play, letting his cat brain take over. He lost himself to them until he was lifted by a large set of callous hands, lifted him up. He made a little noise to voice his confusion. The person holding him laughed. He zoned back in to hear Aries' high-pitched giggling and squealing. He saw the feather swinging into his vision again. He zoned back in on it and reached out to try and grab it, though he's moved away by the hands holding him, and they laughed again. Come on. Dinner is done, Airy. We have to eat, honey. Put the feather away for now and you can play more later, okay? Izuku saw Eri nod and run to put the feather back in the box she got it from, and his teacher lifted him up and looked him in the eyes. Izuku was still feeling the effects of his instincts. It wasn't fully out of them yet, so he tilted his head curiously at the man, who let his body be as limp as a noodle. The man snorted and smirked. You okay, kid? Your eyes are blown out really wide. Suku perked at him and pawed at his face. The feeling of the scruff of his beard on his paw helped him come back to himself. The man laughed softly and rolled his eyes. Glad you enjoyed yourself, kid. Let's go eat. The man carried him and led Eri to the kitchen, where his English teacher was setting up the table. The man laid Izuku on the counter and helped Eri into her chair with the booster seat. His English teacher served both of them and sushi, while Eri and the other humans ate katsudon. Izuku whined in displeasure, though he had a plan. He finished his food and hopped down, sitting below Izawa. The man looked down at him nervously, and Izuku gave the elder his best kitten eyes. Not quite puppy eyes, because he was a cat, he thought to himself. Izuku knew the man was weak to the feline gaze, and as soon as a small piece of pork dropped down to him, the others at the table were somehow none the wiser. Though Izuku did suspect some of it came with the time he spent sneaking the fat bastard that was Sushi's snacks, and his time as an underground hero. Either way, Izuku happily gnawed on his piece of meat, and Sushi hopped down to get his piece. After supper, Eri and his teachers all settled on the couch, and his English teacher turned on another older Disney cartoon, Frozen. Eri watched with rapt attention, Izuku having been dragged onto her lap as they settled in. Much to his dismay, his homeroom teacher was doing the dishes, and his English teacher was in the restroom. And no one was there to save him from Eri's post-supper wiggles as she spun the poor boy into the next dimension. Zuko swore time was still slowing down. He felt a bit like Superman saving Lois Lane. Though halfway into the movie, he felt Eri slump and lean onto his homeroom teacher, who smiled and wrapped an arm, both protectively and comfortingly, around the child. Soon the movie ended, and Eri was still asleep, along with his English teacher. He looked back at his homeroom teacher, who yawned and gently lifted Izuku off of Eri and set him to the side before lifting the small girl and carrying her to her bedroom they had for her in the apartment. He came back in after she was tucked in and gently shook his husband awake, who woke and yawned. Oh, before nodding and mumbling that he was moving as he picked up the cat and lumbered off to their shared bedroom. He felt familiar hands lift him up and carry him off. He was willingly went limp for them. The man chuckled and laid him down on his spot on the man's pillow before laying down himself. Zuko curled up next to the man's head and fell asleep just as quickly as the elder did, purring happily. That one right there. He's the one who made him spill. The man pointed at the dark-haired man, carrying a small black feline. He hummed thoughtfully, and his eyes widened in recognition. Hey, that cat's the man's quirk right there. That's Person. The one beside him grinned and looked over at his accomplice. His eyes filled with malice and a plan as he spoke to his friend. He chuckled as he spoke. I guess we have a cat to nap, don't we? The man blinked a few times, looking at like the other had gone crazy. No, why don't we kidnap him instead? I want to kill the kid or make him nap. That's inhumane, and the other's stupid. Don't be stupid. The first man rubbed his temple and groaned. Never mind, you dumbass. Never mind, you dumbass. Anyway, that's the end of this chapter. I'm very tired. I yawned the moment I said yawned. I do that. Fuck, I do that all the time, so I think my mic catches my yawns. So I've just kind of been like letting it happen. It, yeah, I'm still. It doesn't help that I didn't sleep very well. Anyway, that's all for now.